Now, in terms of importance and potential, is huge. If you look at how many people are not financially served, not just not bank account, but just not having access to finance, that is the rising generation. If you go to India, if you go to Africa, if you go to parts of Southeast Asia, that's where the next generation is. The moment they have access to money, they will grow. They will be entrepreneurial. They will start doing commerce. They will start developing infrastructure and services. So potential is there. We need to finance them. But in order to do that, technology alone is not the only thing. You need, you need kind of boots on the ground to deal with the cash issues, and you need to educate people as well, besides providing a technical solution that can work on your phone or whatever.
Peter, welcome to the Orbit Shifting Talks. Great to have you here. For the benefit of our listeners, do you want to introduce yourself?
First of all, thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here at the Singapore Fintech Festival. I'm Pieter Franken. I'm originally from Holland. Came to Japan as a student and later for my first job. Been in Japan over 35 years, worked most of my life in the finance and technology space in Japan, trying to pioneer and change as much as I can.
Excellent. And you are, of course, one of the pillars of the Singapore Fintech Festival. It's been 10 years now. What has changed at SFF and what has not changed over these 10 years? Because some things are very obvious, like obviously it's become much, much bigger.
Right.
We see participation from more number of countries, more number of companies. But what are some of the not so obvious changes?
Right. I think 10 years ago, most people would ask, what is fintech? We're beyond that stage. I think the big changes is, I think it's specifically coming out of COVID. I think there is an acceleration of things coming together, right? When we started 10 years ago, what is interesting to mention, the big theme of the Singapore Fintech Festival 10 years ago was, can we use the cloud or not in the financial industry? Now you will say, was that the topic? But that was really what we're talking about. Now we're talking about regulation of Bitcoin and so forth. Bitcoin existed at the time, but blockchain was just on the horizon. It was the new magic thing, but it had no use case at that time. But we started to experiment with these things, and we started to experiment with other things. And then AI came along, a couple of years ago, that changed things as well. I think what's exciting right now is we're having some of these things that already were there coming together. If you remember the story of the iPhone was not necessarily a unique invention. It was putting all the parts together into something that was truly unique. And I think now we're at a crossroads where we have, if you look at the fintech decade, it brought us blockchain, it brought us digital assets, it brought us AI, agentic AI, it brought us the cloud, it brought us a lot of other things that were there, where people say, what is this for? What is this for? But now it's coming together. And now you see the true power of that. If you have agentic AI, how do I pay an agent? Well, we can use a stablecoin for that. How can I start tackling things in the financial industry that were very difficult? Like, for example, AML. With AI, we can find very sophisticated patterns and detect way better than we could 10 years ago, and so forth and so forth. So I think really what is the big shift, as apart from, as you mentioned, the scale and everything, is the synergies that are coming out. I think the other thing that's very important is that we always have focused on the developing world, or the global south, Southeast Asia and beyond. Those countries 10 years ago were still connecting themselves to the internet. That has been done. Now those generations are rising and are the next generation to drive the innovation without constraint, without legacy, without all the things that we had 10 years ago struggling with. They're free from that, so they can move really fast, and we see that happen as well. We see a lot of younger generations that are crypto native, mobile native, and so forth, driving the next revolution in finance.
You mentioned the Global South, and one of the very topical themes in the Global South, as well as elsewhere, is financial inclusion. Now, financial inclusion is also one of the themes we see keep coming up at the SFF and everything else that GFTN does. What are your thoughts on how AI and some of these other technologies that you mentioned are going to help financial inclusion? That's my first question.
Right.
And the second and related question is, we know that for technology providers, we all accept that financial inclusion as a goal is good, but is it good for business? Would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Right. Uh, Very, very good question. Let me try to break it in a few parts because it is a complex problem. Financial inclusion has sometimes been abused as a word. Some people have seen it as, do you have a bank account or not? There's a more meaningful way to look at it. Are people being serviced properly in terms of their financial needs? And that is really where the biggest gap is. Even though some people may have access to financial services, they may not be serviced by those services. And the core thing at the bottom of the pyramid is the ability to get access to money, right? People have no money, they need to get a loan. And in order to get a loan, they need to be documented or they need to be identified and so forth. And that when you go in there, you will see there's a lot of challenges even today. The other challenge you will find out is that in those cases, people are still very much dependent on cash, right? So there's a lot of opportunity there to do things differently. But it's very important to understand what the challenges actually are. So there's a use of cash, there is a no access to not enough documentation to lend to, and also financial education is a very important thing. People need to have trust in not using cash. You need to understand how things work digitally. Most people now have a mobile phone, as I mentioned earlier, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be financially included just because you can download an app with a payment option. Payment means you have money. These people need money, so and so forth. So there's some fundamental reasons that space has moved very slowly. Even though there are breakthroughs here and there, there's still a tremendous amount of people that are at the bottom of the pyramid, even though the internet has reached their doorstep. So this is one thing. The other thing is at that space, things are very fragmented. And in order to service that market, you will have to think differently about how to go in there. So from a technology viewpoint, what works for mid and larger, more mature societies or banks that are larger and so forth, doesn't work at the most elementary level. There's a lot of tiny banks there, but they have very small capital base. They can't invest in a lot of technology. And, if you want to go in there, you will have to think differently as to how to, support that. So I think that is very important. Now, in terms of importance and potential, is huge. If you look at how many people are not financially served, not just not bank account, but just not having access to finance, that is the rising generation. If you go to India, if you go to Africa, if you go to parts of Southeast Asia, that's where the next generation is. The moment they have access to money, they will grow. They will be entrepreneurial. They will start doing commerce. They will start developing infrastructure and services. So potential is there. We need to finance them. But in order to do that, technology alone is not the only thing. You need, you need kind of boots on the ground to deal with the cash issues, and you need to educate people as well, besides providing a technical solution that can work on your phone or whatever. The other thing that's very important in this sentence is, in essence, people at the bottom of the pyramid are kind of SMEs, micro SMEs, one or two, papa mom shops. You start by buying a bicycle or a motorbike, so you can do delivery, or you buy a machine or something like that. So you need to really understand what the needs are at that level.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we go back, Peter, to the established financial institutions or the incumbent financial institutions and all the technologies that you mentioned, cloud, then blockchain, etc., these institutions have tried to adopt these and they have had varying levels of success, partly due to technological reasons, partly due to cultural reasons. Now, today it's all about AI. How do you see that playing out? Is it going to be it's the same thing all over again, or is AI going
Right.
to change which institutions and what kind of institutions succeed versus those who don't?
It's a complex question because there's a few elements to it. So first of all, AI itself, I think, is going to have a big impact. When I started my life and career, I started actually as a researcher in the field of AI, very actually researching things that are pretty close to what we're doing today. But this was before the internet existed. This is before we had anything like relational database, etc. So it was technologically compared to where we are today, way behind. But the fundamentals were there. So it's not that AI started yesterday. It's, and actually the beginnings of AI are about 70 years ago. So it's been very much a glacier till about 5, 10 years ago. The glacier's starting to melt and the rivers are starting to flow. And you see that a lot with technology. It doesn't happen overnight. It actually has a lot of roots. Now, if it comes to deploying of AI, um, you can download the ChatGPT app. You can use tools like to make drawings or to make videos or to help you do things better as an individual. And where we see is the AI is really helping a lot of people on the individual level because you're there to supervise what the AI is doing with you, right? And that doesn't touch anything but you and yourself. But the moment you take AI and put it into a regulated entity like a bank, there we have privacy, we have a lot of data, and we have a lot of systems that were built many, many years ago. And suddenly the ball game changes. You can't just put AI onto your database. The database, we don't even know what's in the database after all the modifications that were done over the years. And if you go back in history, you will see that over time, the adoption of new technologies in the banking industry always has been quite slow. Cloud computing is still, on the top list of things to do for many banks. AI will be in the same class. The legacy infrastructure requires a lot of care. It's highly regulated, and we have, as a bank, you have to protect privacy of the customer as your number one goal. So, hallucinations, not understanding what is secret and not secret, and these things, AI doesn't know that, right? Actually, doesn't know anything. It's just regenerating what knowledge there was before. And so as banks are going in there, they realize that this technology you need to do things around it to make it work. It is not perfect. It may never be perfect. So how do you deploy it? So I think as we're growing into that, a lot of companies are learning what works and doesn't work. And it will take some time to really get that right. And specifically companies that are existing, that are regulated, they will have the biggest challenge because they can't cut corners on this. If you're a new company and you're building an AI service to improve improve your shopping list, your grocery purchases or something, that's a very different field from protecting money and so forth. So at the same time, what is also a challenge for a lot of banks right now is that uh, criminals and cyber criminals just got a very, very potent weapon to go and scam their customers. So we have to level up. We're being attacked from the side. Our legacy systems are not helping. So there's quite some challenge, I think, right now for incumbents to catch up. If you remember data warehouse, data lakes, all these things happened through our lifetime. The success ratio of those things also has been low for the same reasons. It's nothing new. So I think AI will play a big role, but the moment that involves more, heavily regulated things where privacy and so forth play a big role, it will take time to right tune AI into that so that you leverage the good side, but you also have to manage the not so good side of AI.
And speaking of AI, of course, there are already very big companies in the space of AI, but there are also a lot of startups coming up. And you mentioned about established companies. We heard one of the established financial institutions that GFTN has tied up with, SBI, to launch the third pillar of what you guys are doing, which is investing. And I'm sure a lot of focus would be around investing in startups involved in AI or using AI. So, could you tell us a little bit about how that's going to play out
From a GFTN perspective,
from a GFTN capital perspective?
okay, so for all clarity, I'm part of GFTN, but my colleagues are managing that. We just announced that GFTN Capital just announced that we're setting up we're setting up the fund. We're running going into operations. Um, the fund is going to focus on growth stage fintech, so beyond the A round, so to speak. So we're so and there's a reason for that. There's a lot of VCs and investors that are very active at the early stages, the angels, the seed investors, the earlier rounds. But there is there's kind of a less focus when a company reaches kind of the base B stage and it needs growth capital to scale up, and that's kind of where we decided to focus. to kind of address an area where there is need versus an area where there is almost like surplus. And that's what we want to focus on in terms of thematics, etc. It's going to be pretty broad. It could involve AI themes, could also involve financial inclusion, could involve digital assets, and so forth and so forth. So, and so that's kind of what the fund is going to focus on. Uh, Fintech is a very active field, but for a lot of investors, it's also something that they don't know enough of, and we hope through the fund to appeal to more investors to invest through the fund to reach, to reach the markets that otherwise are not so easy for them to reach.
Great. And I, for one, would be watching that very closely. So thanks for sharing.
Yes,
And thanks, Peter, for joining us again on the Orbit Shifting Talks. It's been
yes,
a pleasure, and
yes,
look forward to sharing more with you and learning more from you going forward.
yes, and thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here on the Nucleus podcast. I've been, I worked with you and as a company for more than 25 years when we built Shinsei Bank, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.